Action. Camera rolling.
Hello, my name's Jude and I work for Kirklees Libraries, and welcome to our special event, which is a continuation of an event that we held on the 15th of October called The Distracted Journey, Poems from a Slave by Donavan Christopher. And what we're doing today is we're just answering questions that we just didn't have time to answer on the actual 15th of the 10th. So we're all in the room to answer some of the questions, and we've been joined by an extra person as well. So we're going to go around the room and just say who we are, and then we'll go straight ahead. So as I say, my name's Jude, I work for Kirklees Libraries, and then over to my right, we'll introduce Donovan.
That's pointing the other way there.
I know, it's because...
My name's Donavan Christopher, aka the Rapper Man. Really nice to meet you. And I presented the Poems from a Slave on the 15th of October. We're here to answer some more questions.
Fantastic. And then we've got Mohammed.
Thank you, Jude. Yeah, my name's Mohammed Salu. I am a co-founder of Batley Poets and also a cohesion worker for Kirklees Council.
Thank you. And then I'm going to point downwards, which should be easy. We've got Amberine.
No, other side for Amberine.
Yeah, I sort of have both pointing down. Amberine.
Hi, I'm Amberine. I'm the Kirklees Libraries apprentice, and so not as important as Jude and Olivia.
Well, you're more important. You're the future.
Not yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, my name's Olivia and I'm one of the other librarians for Kirklees Libraries. And I think we're all equally important.
Absolutely. Absolutely we are.
So I think we'll kick off then, shall we, with one of the questions from, so like Jude said, these are the ones we had left over from before that Mohammed had collected from the community in his community cohesion work.
Yeah.
So the first question was, children are not born racist. They have no concept of colour. What are we doing to positively educate the young and ultimately make long-term changes?
Mohammed?
We said that together, mate. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. When you see two-year-olds, they don't have any concept as to I'm going to quote and end up quoting Nana Cherry here. They don't have any concept of the tone of skin they're living in, and the only thing that defines is whether they can get on with that other child or not, and that's about personality and whether the other child will do what they tell them to do. So where does it change? And that's where the influences come in. As you grow up, as you are exposed to influences, whether they're in the home, in the neighborhood, via media, those influences start showing you to be different to a person who of a different color to you, or from a different race to you, and on the other side, you also see yourself as being not as important. So myself, for example, going back to my childhood, I will have seen myself as a member of the migrant community, and that meant that I was not an equal, if you like, to a white person or a white child. And it's strange, but you feel that way and you're made to feel that way. And then what happens is that there becomes a kind of like a superiority and a complex where you see yourself as a lesser person because the tone of skin you're living in. So how do we change this? How do we change those influences that show that have an impact to maintain that 2-year-old's perception that it doesn't matter what you look like, it matters whether I can play with you, I can be your friend, or I can't be your friend? How do we change that? And I think that's the big challenge. I'm going to hand that over to Donovan.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you've said there, Mohammed. And as I said, that when we were kids, when I was in schools, I was getting racial abuse because of the colour of my skin. And of course it upset me. But it wasn't until I got older, maybe, you know, after I'd left high school, I'm reflecting back. And I thought, actually, those infants didn't know anything about the derogatory names they were calling me. And I thought, it must have come from their parents. So when we say, what are we doing positively to educate the young and ultimately make long-term changes, I think everyone should start at home, because I know those kids that were calling me those names, they picked those names up from their parents, or there was influenced, as you say, Mohammed, by their parents or family members. Because, you know, as I said, I grew up in the 70s, and just hearing some of that and thinking about it, it's taught behaviour. So that's where that's got to stop. We've got to stop teaching that ideology that one colour, because you're a certain colour, you're superior to me. And as you say, Mohammed, that you do end up thinking that you become less of a person to your white peers. But as I say, I think some of us were a bit more grounded, and I didn't feel lesser than anybody. I just expected to have a bowl of cornflakes if you're having a bowl of cornflakes. Yeah. And that's all I expected as a child. And when it wasn't happening, I identified that it was because of the colour of my skin. It's taught behaviour, that. So we need to ask the parents that have got a lot to answer to, and stop teaching the kids derogatory rhetoric.
You might disagree. Sorry, go on, Jude.
No, you go ahead, please.
You might disagree with me here, but I think children should be taught the concept of colour, because, say, for example, when you teach like I teach my little one, we are all different colours, and we should all be happy with our colours. But also teach him, well, black people have different experiences, and I think we need to teach our children the concept of colour, so they can identify, say, someone's bullying or harassing a minority. They can say, well, there's nothing wrong with their colour. I think erasing it, we're also erasing people's identities. And instead of saying, well, we're all, we're all like no color kind of thing, we should say, yes, that person is black or is brown, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that is something to be celebrated and not something to be diminished.
Yeah, definitely. A bit of both, I think. I think a bit of both, really, because I didn't have to be told that people were white. I didn't have to be told that. And I didn't have to be told people were Asian. I didn't have to be told that as a kid. I just enjoyed my company with my friends. Kids are innocent and they just play. And what can happen is once they open their eyes and realize, oh, you're a different color, now they start to analyze you even more because of maybe things that their parents have told them about black people. Kids don't really see color. And that's why I says I wouldn't talk to them about it unless something came out from one of these young kids that wasn't supposed to come out. Kids don't, we know they don't recognize colors. And as I says, I think back and I thought, why were they calling me that? What did they know about those names? They didn't know nothing. It was their parents. Kids become their parents. So at some stage, nobody ever told me there were white kids and Asian kids. I got told I was black. And even though I knew there were white kids, I didn't have a problem with that. I had a problem with the ones who were giving me hassle. Yeah. And so you'd have to break it down that they're black, they're brown. Kids will see that eventually. And as I says, even as an infant, you don't notice it unless you're told. And that's when you start becoming aware that actually they don't eat what we eat. And it will start to cause a chasm. Just allow people to live. And the minute somebody says something that a bit displaced, I think that is the time to challenge it, rather than today we're going to learn there's black people, white people. No. So it's not in stone, but that's my thoughts on it. And I was never told that kid was an Asian, that kid's white. I got told that I was black and made me feel different. Yeah. By the powers, but they're all white. So imagine telling black kids this when white people have the power. Yeah, you become left. You can fade away in the background. So I'm not disagreeing with it, Ambreen. I'm just thinking.
Oh no, you've changed my mind. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to just think about it a bit wider. Do you know what I mean?
I think there's definitely two sides, because growing up there was like 4 of us that were really, really close at high school. And one of the girls in my group was Indian, and I was just saying it wasn't until we had a 15-year high school reunion, I was chatting to her, that she said actually she felt quite left out, because we'd drag her to see Blur and Oasis and all the Britpop bands, and we thought she was having a great time. And it turned out that she said, actually, no, I love Bhangra, I loved R&B, but she was probably one of about sort of, in a high school of thousands, probably one of about 10 Asian children. And she said, nobody ever asked me. And it never crossed my mind. And she was one of my close friends, and I just felt awful. But I just saw her as my friend. I didn't see her as Indian or non-white. I just thought, oh, that's just my friend.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's a bit of what Ambreen was saying. So sort of unconsciously, we were sort of leaving her out, but we didn't even realise.
I'm saying, Olivia, at that particular point, I'm saying that again, you didn't have no differences over colour or anything, and you don't realise people have a different culture. They're just your friends.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Unless you go to their house and all of a sudden you start hearing stuff or music, you think, okay, where's this music from?
Yeah.
So I'm saying, Olivia, that nothing wrong with what you did, because your friend was your friend. You're all in that environment and time. She wasn't excluded, and you just thought we were all the same, which is beautiful.
I mean, I just want to come in on, because I did say prior to this, when we had a little conversation, I said I never remember any of my poetry, but I've actually remembered the line that I wanted. So I thought I'll share it. It goes, different isn't a problem. Sorry, how does it go again? Different isn't a problem. It makes us strong. When we recognize that difference isn't something wrong. And I think that's really in a nutshell. One of the things that happens with friendship is that we make bonds over commonality. So if we enjoy, and I know it might not be enjoyable to go watch Blur, which I but even then, the thing about it wasn't probably the fact that you're going to see Blur, the fact that you were having the company together and going together. But I get the concept. But we do develop friendships through commonalities. Those are the first breaking point, first barriers that we break, and then after that, it's about understanding. Now, if as friends, what you do is you do start taking an interest in what your friends do, what they're interested in, and that's the side where it becomes much wider. But you have a mainstream interest, Blur, and you have Bhangra. And this is, I'm sorry, Blur are going to sue me by the end of this, but you have that mainstream interest, and sometimes the smaller interests within the group are left in the corner because there's not the confidence to share that. And it's about how do you have the bit, or rather, it's about. I don't think it's about changing ourselves. I think it's about individually looking and thinking, what can we do to, I want to know more about you because you're my friend. Or saying, look, are you sure you're all right with this? Knowing that maybe that person isn't. Now, it might not be because of because they happen to be a different race or ethnicity. It might be because someone's shy and doesn't want to say something. So it's that friend circle. But commonality brings us together, and we've just got to continue to grow from there.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking about is about the visibility of people within culture that we grow up with, whether it's books, TV, etc. And if you are exposed, or you're like as a white girl growing up in the UK, if I'm exposed to different people who maybe even in soap operas, say, and the music they listen to is different to what I might have come across, or what their home is like, or might be the same. It might be exactly the same as my home. It might be listening to the same music, but like if I get exposed to Bollywood, or I get exposed to, I don't know, drum and bass, or then it sort of means that you might think, you might start that conversation a bit earlier, maybe, or people might feel more confident to start that conversation with you a bit earlier. Or you might say, I heard that the other day, and do you ever listen to that, or whatever. I don't know whether that's something, just the idea of when you look around, that there's a real diversity in what we see generally day to day where we are, whether it's TV, on the radio, and also seeing people who are in more prominent positions who aren't all from the same ethnicity, which is beginning to change, I hope, but then you kind of have somebody who, at one time it was women, wasn't it? Women weren't on the screen, and they weren't allowed to read the news, or we had a big breaking point in I think it might have been the 60s or a bit earlier. Annie Nightingale, she's celebrating, she's a Radio 1 DJ, she's celebrating being on Radio 1 for, I can't remember how many years, but decades, but she was the first. They didn't want women on the radio, so hopefully I think it's so important that we see and hear people who are different to what we consider, maybe we've grown up with, to just expand our thinking or our ideas, and then to have those chats, just general chats about things. Maybe.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And as I say, so I think children are not born racist, but it is that taught behaviour, whether it's family, friends, something they see on the TV. So, we start by making sure, educate the young people with a balance. And my last thing on this would be that unless something is said derogatory, there's harmony. Yeah, there's, once somebody brings out something derogatory against another, they've begun to see themselves as superior. Yeah, and so once nothing's said, live and enjoy. But if something's said, you have to swiftly deal with it, because it could be something they've picked up and thought it was cool, and actually it's very offensive. Do you know what I mean? And you're relying on people's emotions and sensitivity after that to realise, didn't you think it was going to be a bit insensitive? No, that's what you're going to get with some of it.
I guess sometimes children will say words from a young age that they've heard, but they don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
So it's important for all of us to be able to say, "Oh, do you know actually what that word means?"
Yeah, you've got to nip it in the bud.
Upset somebody. Yeah, and
just let people live, grow, treat people with courtesy and respect. The minute you lose that common courtesy and it starts to become derogatory, especially when it's an individual or a school environment, it needs to be nipped in the bud at that particular moment. I don't think you need to introduce it to young kids. The older ones, you can discuss, you can have an open discussion. Have you ever been racially abused? That's for everybody. Do you know what I mean? But for key stage 1 and 2, let them grow the little flowers. Just let them grow. Just water them, water and feed them, and let them enjoy that company and that time. And the people who work with these young kids, the minute you should hear anything that derogatory, that's when you act. Because the light's being turned on somewhere. Up until that point, it's harmony. Kids playing in the sandpit and in the school. The little kids were just enjoying company. But when something said, "Oh, Donovan's parents are from Africa out there," or something, that's not necessarily derogatory. No. You just because they've said that doesn't mean to say it's derogatory, and that's where
question, isn't it?
The superiors or the support systems have to realise, well, actually, that's not so bad. Maybe we can talk about things in a different country. That's where I stand on it. I was a people person, always have been, and I ain't got a problem with colours. But if it comes up, I try and iron it out. A lot better these days than we did back then.
Yeah. I think we could probably talk about this question for the whole thing, so I'll just move on to the next one. But I thought that was really thought-provoking, Sue, sort of different approaches, and I think everything said there was correct, but it's just lots of different thought processes going on there.
Everything together, and
Right, so this is another one from the community. If I can make it come up. How do we overcome a fear of groups of Black Afro-Caribbean youths in our communities?
Breed. We're all going to take a snap at it.
Yeah.
My take on that is you don't overcome something that shouldn't be there in the first place. First of all, I think maybe you should look at your own biases and ask yourself why you fear groups of Black Afro-Caribbean youth, because there's nothing to be fearful of. And second of all, I don't think it should be on Black youth to make themselves appear more nicer or more more appealing to you, because it's not on minorities to please their oppressors, because they're the ones being oppressed. So it's up to you to learn how to change your biases so that they don't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Fantastic
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually take out Black, Afro, and Caribbean from that sentence, it's from that question rather. It's probably a question that could be asked in a number of different neighborhoods. And the thing about this is that it changes it then into this whole thing about youth. And when you look at, I mean, I mean, I'm going back to my childhood, childhood, I said, well, my youth as a young person, going back about 3 decades, that's how old I am. And there's a particular wall in our area that's, I still live in the same area, and there's a particular wall that was always known for a place where young people used to hang out. And it's low enough to sit on, and the footpath, we had people standing and chatting. There was a lot of energy. There was a lot of wanting to impress people. There was a lot of noise. And as a result of that, we had a wonderful time. Now, people using the footpath there, what was their experience? We didn't really think about. It wasn't that we were being nasty to them. It's just that as young people, you're interested in what you're doing and your bubble, and you're not really looking around you. People will have crossed over to the other side of the road because they didn't want to walk through us, if you like. There might have been 15 of us there. People sometimes don't, even I, when out, probably would want to walk around rather than through. But that's the thing about it. But was that fear? Did we think about it then? And I think this is something that, like I say, I know I'm taking the Black, Afro, and Caribbean out of this at the moment, but this is something that we kind of like forget from our youth, what we were like. And then when we look, and although what we see today might not exactly replicate what we were, you'll find that a lot of those same things, that energy, that being young, they're not bad, they're young. And this is the part that we forget. The other part that we forget as well is that when you look at 15 or 20 young people on street corner, you forget that in that age group or in that age category, there's probably in the town somewhere in the region of about 300 or 400 people. And we're not looking at, when we're looking at 20 from 400, we're not looking at 380. So we're not seeing the positive Black, Afro-Caribbean youths who are in our neighborhood doing fantastic stuff. So what we're doing is we're judging 400 people because of the actions of 20. So we've got to look back on this, and we've got to say, well, hold on a second. These are young people. They've got a lot of energy. And is that the reason why they're as loud as they are making as much noise as they are? And didn't we do the same? And then we've got to pull back from there. And then the next thing, obviously, is that, well, what do you know about young people in your neighborhood? What sort of experience, what sort of events have you gone to where that's been happening? What sort of work is happening for you? What sort of opportunities are there for young people there? Let's have a look at that. What can I do to support and help young people in my neighborhood with opportunities? I don't want to shape them. That's kind of like slightly wrong, but if you know what I mean, for want of a better word, I don't want to shape them. I want them to shape themselves. I want them to create their own identities. But what can I do to help that? What can I do to facilitate that? And this is
also,
the thing.
With that question, how do you know they're Caribbean youth?
Yeah.
We don't go around with our ethnicity or nationalities.
They might be British.
Yeah.
They might be British youths.
Yeah.
It's an unconscious bias, I think.
I think it is, but I think it's about breaking down those biases and understanding.
Yeah.
And the thing is about bias is that it's not until you decide to bring it down that it comes down. You as an individual have to look at your biases, or I as an individual have to look at my biases to understand that, well, hold on a second. If there's 20, there's 380 who are all getting branded by the same rod and why. And that's when you realize that, hold on, no, this isn't right, what I'm thinking or what I'm saying. But I can understand the reason why someone who's slightly older people for some reason always blame younger people for being loud and noisy, and it's not. It's just their energy that they've got, and it's a wonderful energy. Donovan.
Yeah, just to add to what Ambreen said and Mohammed, that you can take away the Black Afro-Caribbean youths because you've got groups of youths of all backgrounds in all areas And as I says, just reflecting back to Stephen Lawrence, it wasn't a group of young Black Afro-Caribbeans that caused him to lose his life. And I think wherever we live, you're going to have communities of young people. You've already really answered it more, and I can't really add anything more than that these groups of young people, yeah, and as you said, people who walk around you, you're not there looking to cause trouble, yeah. And I think you've got two sets of groups. You may have a group of young people on the corner who are a bit boisterous, or who are a bit idle, who seem to be causing trouble. Now, if you know they are causing that kind of trouble to everyday people, you have to report that to the police and ask them to investigate it thoroughly or properly, you know, because you don't want young groups of kids, young people disturbing anybody's sanctuary. So, you know, I don't think you should have a fear of groups. And I suppose, again, it sounds like it's from a white person who's living in a black area, because you know, how do we overcome a fear of groups of Black Afro-Caribbean youths in our communities?
Yeah, because part of my thinking was, as well as everything that's been said, which I think is, you know, obviously it's really good to hear. I'm also thinking about what kind of negative perceptions do people have, you know, where are we starting from in the fact of media, or a lot of you know, how often groups of Black Afro-Caribbean youths sort of put on the media as saying, look at all this that they're doing and stuff. It's often quite in a negative way. So sometimes I think it might be the perception of what a group of Black Afro-Caribbean youths might be like, which isn't, you know, I think that's where we have to say, why do we have a fear of youths, but why in this particular incident that the person's asked the question about groups of Black Afro-Caribbean youths, why do we have a particular fear? Where does that fear come from? And, you know, what are we thinking as soon as we might see certain people in certain situations? What are we thinking? And is that correct? Has it got anything to back it up? And usually not.
And I think
also, sorry, Donovan.
Olivia. No, Olivia, please.
I was going to say, you could sort of turn it around on its head a little bit and say, rather than what can we do to overcome a fear, is what could we do to engage these youths, to not just the Black Afro-Caribbean youths, but again, all youths, because if there are groups of people of any race standing around, it might be that there's a very convenient low wall in the middle of the footpath that's
and also free Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly.
They might be getting free Wi-Fi.
Can I just point out that that low wall that me and my friends were on, I was the quiet one. I was very well behaved.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, we believe that totally, Mohammed.
So maybe we need to be investing in more, this is a whole other debate, but more youth groups and more things for these people, to these youth places that they can go to. Because I think the key to overcoming any fear is like Mohammed said, remembering what you were like. I mean, there weren't enough people in my village to hang around in a group of many, but we still hung around in a small group, and you hang around with your mates, don't you? So I think people need to remember that. But then the young people need something to do.
And when I was when I was in my juniors state sort of thing, there were loads of groups of white guys around the streets, because we had to keep out of their way, because they were like football thugs, and they didn't like us anyway. But you had crews, and from every area you had a white. So over the changing of time, I mean, we've had to live through that, and had a few run-ins with them, and you know, we're kids keeping out of their way and they're being bullies. But that question could have been asked 30, 40, 50 years ago. Yeah, but it's a different environment now, you know, different playing field. But they're just young people. It's not a case of they're all black and all them little groups have kids of all backgrounds. Black kids in there, white kids, Asian kids are all in a little clique. You know, they're all in a little group. So it's not about overcoming a fear. I think it's about trying to engage them and support them.
And just talk to them.
Yeah, it might be free Wi-Fi they're hanging out there, because I know you've got certain places where we can get Wi-Fi here, lads, and they're all quite cool. They're dressed the part and look the part, but actually they're just young mates having a get together and not realizing that they may be disturbing people's sort of serenity. Do you know what I mean? We were kids like, you know what, we better move from here, because we knew we had to deal with our parents. There were times, well, not all the time, but there were occasions when, you know what, let's move away from here because we don't want to upset these
Before anybody tells on us, yeah.
It was usually when an auntie was walking by, because you knew the auntie knew your
That
mum.
as well.
We all
That as
became
well.
saints.
That as well. Yeah, so, you know, have no fear, as I say. You shouldn't have fear. And that's where you talk to your community leaders or your community organisations, you know, but it's not something that you report straight away to the police.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's about trying to engage them or find out what, you know, as I say, it's a bit stereotypical, really. So it's very difficult to answer because it covers everybody, but because it says Black Afro-Caribbean youths, yeah. So I think we've covered that one, Olivia.
Yeah. So, did the Black Lives Matter events give a voice to the Black community, and do you feel it's had a positive impact on addressing inequalities? So this is how I'll just clarify. This is how the question was put to Mohammed. We haven't written this one in this way.
Donovan, over to you, mate.
Well, did Black Lives Matter? We should say, does Black Lives Matter? Because did the Black Lives Matter makes it sounds like it's all over and it was just a shout for a weekend. Of course, Black Lives Matter gives a voice to the community. It gives a voice to the people, not just the Black community. Because as you can see, that it is supported by people from all walks of life and all backgrounds. And do I feel it's had a positive impact on addressing inequalities? I'm going to say personally, no. As I explained earlier, we can talk all day long. My dad was like this. My dad would tell me what needs to be done. He's not going to come back later this evening and ask me why I haven't done any of those jobs that he wanted doing. Yeah, so it's about you know, you can have as much discussion as you want. Don't involve me unless you're going to make changes. Because all I'll be looking for, I'll be like a rat. I'll be like waiting for the changes to happen. I'm waiting. When are we going to get to the changes part? Because that's when you're going to hear them. You can talk all day, in fact, all year if you want. And it is a bit like kryptonite to me. I'm letting the people know from now. If you're going to talk, it's about moving things forward and actually making those changes. In terms of the Black Lives Matter event, what's happened to George Floyd, I personally don't think enough has happened since George Floyd. I personally don't think anything's happened, anything that's tangible, because there were still Black people being murdered by the police in America a couple of weeks after that. So, you know, the struggle goes on. That's all I will say. And the Black Lives Matter organisation, it's just another part of the struggle. And we hope that we can make some positive changes that we can actually feel and actually see tangible changes. Right now, when people talk, don't know if there's going to be any change. It's just a talk and everybody forgets about it. So positive changes means swift action. And they should have shut down that police force. They should have shut it right down. That would have told me, right, they're serious about this. Shut it down. Yeah. Look into what's gone on and then make it transparent. Because I don't think nobody knows what's happened to the officer unless you're following that case methodically. You don't know what's happened to those officers. All of them officers that were that were around there that day should be held guilty and responsible for that young man's death. So, yeah, Black Lives Matter. It does give a voice to the community, and as far as a positive impact in addressing inequalities, I wouldn't say it necessarily has done that. Amber?
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that this question just portrays the fact that there was a lot of performative activism going on at that point, because everyone jumped on the bandwagon to say it's all wrong, but then they just waited for everyone to forget about it and kind of just like moved on. So even though Black Lives Matter are still out there trying to make changes, everyone else has just gone, yes, we've talked about it, let's move on now. Yeah. Like even with Breonna Taylor, she was murdered by police while sleeping, but they've done everything they could to paint her as like the bad person. They've even asked, like tried to pay her, was it X, to say that she was involved in drugs or something. And the thing is, nothing has still been done. And I just don't understand in what rational world you could say, well, murdering a woman that's sleeping is legal or even moral.
Yeah, that's where we're at with it. So, you know, as I say, some of the questions that come in, you know, the person who asks some of these questions, they have a history of their own. They have an history and a character of their own that you know, maybe they need to, as I says, you know, it's a question, it's a good question, but I think they could have answered that for themselves to some degree if they're really looking at these issues.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from my side, just to add to that, I mean, I'm sure Donovan will remember Rodney King, and the video footage from that, and then of course Stephen Lawrence, and what we saw in both of in both those cases, and then we had this wave of there needs to be change, there needs to be something happening. With the whole report came out, and everything that was included in there, and the word institutionalized racism, for example, became a very popular word, a buzzword of the time. And we're 30 years from there, and we're looking at the same images. And I think that's where it's downheartening, because we've had the images, we've had the incidents that should have been the moment of change. And we've carried on, and we've come to a point where we've got the incidents, and we're having the incidents, and that is very frustrating on the level of in regards to Black Lives Matter, and on more of a local level. I think it has had some impact. I'd like to see, I agree with Donovan and with Ambreen, that we need to see change happen. We need to have tangible change that's going to affect individual lives. I mean, I always said, growing up in the time that I grew up, I wanted my children to grow up in a time where they didn't have to face the type of racism or any form of hate like how we did. And unfortunately, we haven't reached there. But I suppose my hope now is that my grandchildren will find that time. Well, hopefully, Ambreen, you'll see that time. That's our hope.
Yeah.
And I think you do have to have that hope on a local level. I know the inequalities. The council have put that into the corporate plan, which is positive. Within the council, we've been having those listening circles, which are again positive. But it does all boil down to talk is great. It's fantastic. It's an outlet for people to share their views, their opinions, and say how they feel. But there has to be tangible change that's made, and we have to be heading in a direction where and we have to have kind of like a timetable to get there, and not one that spans beyond Ambreen's lifetime anyway.
Do you think Black Lives Matter actually is a sort of framework for people coming together as well who have common goals? I know I've seen quite a lot on social media, some quite big movements that have come out of people connecting through Black Lives Matter. So maybe some of the people were part of the original group when it started, maybe 30 years. No, I can't remember exactly. I know I looked this up, but it's a good few years ago that Black Lives Matter came about as an organization. I know I'm looking at Donovan now because he'd say, oh, it's always been there, and it's true. But I'm just thinking, I wonder if under the umbrella of Black Lives Matter is kind of like a movement that people are able to come together with a common ground, which means that people are starting to shift the narrative and the sort of the talk in a different way, which is quite radical. There's some quite radical thinking happening. So I don't know whether that's, I see that as a positive, but I don't see that yet being put into place where things have changed in day-to-day life or in the systems that we live in. I
think it's just
I'm probably being a bit Pollyanna-ish. I'm probably going, oh, there is a positive. But I felt that I've seen people come together and creating different spaces to actually not just talk, but actually put things together to say, this is what we're working to, this is how we're doing it, this is what we want to achieve.
There's definite positives, but you want to make sure things don't fizzle out and something comes of it.
I'm old school. If there's a problem, how do we fix it?
Yeah.
And we action it. We get onto that straight away. We action it. That's what I know.
Yeah.
And the problem that they have in America right now that transcends into England, that problem in America is so great, because I see it as 400 years they're still talking about these issues.
I know.
And the next time another issue comes up, I see this as still the same. It's all part of the same 400 years of rubbish. The ideology and colonialism, mentally, the destruction mentally of black people through colonialism and through law, the Jim Crow laws, the constitutions, the amendments they keep making. America is, and I'm going to say it is really, it is the pit of oppression for black people. Because as I say, if the window's broke, I need to get a glazier in there by this evening and sort that out. That's how simple I see the rhetoric that black people have to suffer, and the way American society and laws deal with their cries. They just plagiarize it for a while. Like Ambreen said, they talk. And as I said, nothing happens. Nothing's going to get changed.
Well, just sort of to bring a book into it, I recently read, I think it came out quite a while ago, but I recently read Black Klansman by Ron Stallworth. I don't know if any of you have ever read it. It was a film later on. I've not seen the film yet.
The Black Klansman.
Yeah.
So he was the first black policeman in Colorado Springs in like the 1970s, and he led a fantastic investigation where he actually sort of semi-accidentally became a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And so he did all the phone call things, and he got on quite good terms with the Klan leader. And then they sent a white police officer out to do the face-to-face things. And he really achieved loads. I mean, he said himself, he never actually led to any arrests, but all the work he did was about prevention. So he stopped a load of cross burnings, and he stopped a whole generation from having to sort of experience all the hatred that would have come along with it. But after a certain amount of time, the investigation got closed down. It was forcibly closed down, sort of brushed under the carpet. He moved on and he had a great career in other places. But just the fact that a black man had managed to join the Ku Klux Klan, he got quite high up in it. And it could have gone so far. It could have been so amazing. But it wasn't allowed to continue. It's just such a shame. But what he did was fantastic.
I also think, as Donavan said, when there's a problem, we fix it. And how you said, obviously, with the KKK, a lot of the problems we have is the fact that they won't even admit there's a problem. So if you can't admit there's a problem, how are you supposed to find a solution for it?
That's right. That's what I'm saying. They will talk with you and act like they don't understand what you're actually saying to them. And we're trying to put this in simple layman's terms, and they'll still talk about the issue and nothing gets resolved from it. And then they've got another issue. I did write my MP about an issue concerning the MBE, and he actually wrote me back saying, actually, we're focusing more on COVID stuff at the moment, and they're taking my priority. And I'm so, apart from it, he hasn't really got back to me on about the MBE stuff, because I don't think we should be giving them out.
I think it's also the whole.
We should be giving any of them out.
Yeah, I think they also do the either or, don't they? Like you can focus on two issues at once. There's not, we don't have time for this, or we can only do
Yeah. And the fact that he's told me we're looking at COVID stuff more at the moment, I might take a bit longer to get back to you. I'm not happy, because I'm going, I don't work like that. I'm not working how you lot work and want me to work. And that's why I might be a bit of a problem to you all, because you want me to work like you, and I'm not going to do that. Work on my time as well. Yeah. So it's a two-way street if that be the case. So we shouldn't be giving out MBEs. That's a question that needs to be addressed. Or the Governor General medals that they're giving out, where there's an angel stood on a black man's neck.
Yeah,
I don't know. I've sent it around to some of you. So these are issues that they're major problems, and what you're doing is perpetuating empire subliminally, still perpetuating empire. So all this, what we do, we're still subjugated to the empire's rule, because they mitigate it in their achievement awards to Marcus Rashford more recently. So we have got major problems, and when the government have those things still at the top of their echelons or their award schemes, what happens to society? You can't fix the rest of society if they ain't looking at things like that and making Britain look more inclusive, more inclusive and with more racial harmony. But until they get rid of those empire symbolisms, we're gonna have problems. We're gonna have problems.
Yeah.
Benjamin Zephaniah denied his MBE. I think it was back in the early 90s.
Yes,
and even at that point, we say the man in America, the man, and at that point, the aristocracies or the learned should have actually looked into it and thought, you know what, we need to revamp these. But they didn't. They said, okay, bro, Benjamin, no problem. We'll wait till Marcus gets of age and we'll give the next black person or Asian person who's unsuspecting. Of course, I want an achievement. And sometimes that achievement, you're not really aware. Oh, I'm going down to Buckingham Palace to get an award. I must have done well. And if you don't realize what the MBE stands for or represents, we're going to always have problems until they clean their act up at that level. And I'm going to say one more thing before passing it on, is that tied to that was the slave bill that you've all paid money towards, and me included. It's just been paid off in 2015. Can you see fire coming out of my mouth? I'm spitting fire. These are the things that we need to address with this society in Britain before we can think we have a sort of total harmony.
This is also why it doesn't make sense when they say that it was in the past, or, you know, slavery doesn't exist anymore. But the repercussions for slavery and for colonialism are here today, and they're affecting people today. There's no point. Carlo wrote about it in his book, Natives, I think it's called. It's a biography, but he also addresses how a lot of what's happened is in action today, and the repercussions are still going today, and I don't know how you can turn a blind eye to that.
Can I just share a couple of lines here from Infect Us or Infectious? Has the future been infected by what's happened in the past, or has the past affected the future? I might even ask. And that's, you know, them are a couple of lines that I want to show you that it's so true, and some people don't realize that that's possible. They don't realize what happened back then. No, that's gone. That's finished. What are you talking about
it?
But it's also a case of wanting to say, oh yeah, that past is finished with, but then you're also holding on to that past. So for example, with the Empire medals, you're still holding on to that past, and the history of the empire, as an example, or the history that's being taught, is a glorified history. And this divides people, because then you've got a local town. So if we look at any of the local towns, we'll find the influence of lots of different people over the many years, over the centuries, the decades. And the recent influences over the past 100 years are being foregone for a glorified influence, which we really don't even actually know was as wonderful as what they say it was. So local towns are very mill orientated, and we know that the mill owners did very well. We know that the mill workers were probably were pushed to the limits to actually make a reasonable living. However, because the buildings are standing as they are, it's seen as an economic boom for the area. It's seen as a wonderful time, and there's a lot of it's a cherished time. And then that is compared to modern day. And modern day is being seen as, oh well, this is it was wonderful then, it's terrible now. And the reality isn't that. And this is the problem with the past. People only look at the glorified moments. They don't look at the full picture that had so much oppression on so many people.
And the devastation it's caused.
Yeah, and it's not taken into account, you see. So we've got to learn from our past. That's what history is about. And when we look at our past and we see a time in there, or when we see a time in history, and we see that that wasn't a good time, or we see that there were things there that were not done right and there are lessons to learn, we need to teach those lessons. We need to be open about those lessons.
Yeah, rather than repeating things.
And if you think about Chernobyl, it might not have Chernobyl. When was that? It was in the late
80s?
Was it the early 90s?
Late 80s, wasn't it?
Was it the late 80s? Chernobyl.
Yeah.
And this is what people do. Stuff like Chernobyl, what happened in Chernobyl, that radiation's still there, killing and poisoning people. It was an event that happened decades ago.
Yeah.
But not as long as slavery, but events, it's cause and effect in it. So those events like Chernobyl and even in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the years of devastation that it caused afterwards, it's just like what we have now today. Yeah, the disdain of what happened during the times of the empire still linger today in law, in constitutions, and
That's
in
the thing, though, they're a little bit more hidden, because like Chernobyl and things, you can see, and it's every now and again it's on the news, and you know about the radiation, but all the sort of colonialism things, it's all bubbling away under the surface, so it affects people, but because
like
it's not
radiation.
Oh yeah,
Like radiation. Destroying people, and it's a radiation. They used to call it pollution back in the 70s, but I think we call it is like radiation. Yeah. Just looking at that, how long's that country been devastated because of the I mean, Japan has, I mean, how long was it before Japan? I mean, I'm sure they're still feeling the effects of the bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Generations and families, even the country. But it's modernized now, but there is still the underlying effects of what happened when America dropped those bombs. So, slavery and the empire, it's left a stain of radiation that still you can be checked on the Geiger counter. You go to certain parts of northwest Britain or northern Britain, you're going to find these high levels of people with a negative rhetoric towards ethnic minorities. That's the radiation that's bubbling.
So I was going to just jump in and say, if people want to know, like, or just read about certain things that maybe we've talked about, to do with like history, to do with different people's points of views, we've got a real collection of books available, so you can borrow from us for free, and just through the Libby app, and you just go into kirkleys.gov.uk and just put in ebooks, I think, unless we've got a banner that we can get up, Olivia?
Have we got a banner?
Have we got a banner? I'm just thinking there's been such a lot of chat today, discussion, I should say.
You can get into it through that one, can't you?
Yeah, fantastic. I'm thinking that if anybody who's listening or watching wants to just find out more, we've got a real breadth of books available, both modern, sort of about what it's like to be in Britain now, but also we've got things from the abolitionists, we've got significant poets from the Black community, historical and modern. So do check it out, do have a look and see, And if you see things that are missing, give us a shout.
And as I said, it is about being part of a social change, and I put it to any community groups that are out there, especially young community groups. Take up a cause. You have to. This is helping the question about shouldn't people be writing rather than going out on the street and protesting?
And pulling.
It's imperative. It's imperative. I've noticed even with the unemployment situation, the amount of petitions that's going around. And I'm putting it to maybe Kirklees Library or this group that we need to start a petition about, and I'm going to say maybe the MBE, I think there's a petition already going out against the Governor General's medal. But I think after these discussions, you have to have a cause, and somebody needs to take up a cause, and we're supporting this cause with this group, and we're seeing it through. We all need to write to Barry Sherman, or you look at issues in your own town and make sure that you can be a part of a peaceful and radical change in your local town or city. Yeah, we can deal with nationalism later on, but if you don't want to take on England, you can take on your own town. Bristol's doing that. Huddersfield got their own arguments that they might want to look at. And I'm saying to these community groups, organisations, if you're not writing to your MP and starting petitions, I don't think you're doing much to make a proper change. Because the only way we're going to get proper change is by getting the laws or rules changed with a peaceful approach towards it. And it's imperative that, I think, or else it's a case of this is just filling up the time. We all feel a bit better about ourselves because we've talked about it, but what have we done?
So Olivia's put up a... Oh, sorry, Donovan.
That's me there. That's
okay.
That's the bottom line, really, that we must have to do whatever comes from this. There needs to be something that's rolling away from it. Conscious youth, I hope they're listening.
Yeah. They
and
did writing to MP, communicating with them, that's one of the best things you can be doing. So if everyone can...
Start them petitions.
Yeah.
I mean, is there something else? Sorry.
I also think the non-Black community, whatever colour you are, also needs to realise you don't always need to be the leaders in causes. If you look around, in any area, you will find there are already Black people leading, and what you need to do is amplify their voices, fund their cause, and literally just back them up. You don't always need to be at the forefront. We're not white saviours, and we just need to stand back, listen, and give them a platform. Yeah,
it's just support, really, because there's nothing wrong with supporting these groups. It is about, if they exist, it's about, can you support them? Can you give them some advice? They might not know they need that bit of advice, but don't try and take it from them and start shaping it. Yeah, I would agree with you there. Definitely.
Any thoughts, Mohammed, on what we've just said?
Sorry?
Any thoughts on what we've just said?
Yeah, no, I think I said my PR. We'll move on to the next question. I think it's been well covered by Donovan and Ambreen on that one. Yes.
Cool.
So, well, the final question, because I know we've got loads more, but again, we've run out of time because there's so much to say on all of this. I thought this would be a good one to finish up on, because you've got to engage with your MPs. You've got to get your voice out there. One way to get your voice out is through poetry. So, what do we think? Can poetry be political?
It can be poetical. And if it can be poetical, it can be political. Yeah. There is loads of protest poetry out and about. Yeah. I think even some of mine's slightly protesting, but there is a lot more vigorous protest poetry that goes out there. So yeah, it can be political. Mohammed?
Yeah, I think it's another string. I mean, poetry is a form of expression, so you can, I mean, you can express everything from love to politics, and everything in between. Love and war. Sorry, yes, absolutely. If one of the advantages, I mean, we talked a bit earlier. I think Donovan mentioned about the petitions and about whether people go out on protests and the rest. I think all of these, it's not, and I think Ambreen mentioned as well, it's not this or that. It's about everything. And it's about using all the avenues we've got to get our voices heard. And this is where poetry does come in, because quite often the creativeness through poetry will allow you to reach sometimes a different audience. Sometimes it'll just be something that you say which again resonates with people who are listening. I mean, we did the Bat Lift, I think it was 2018 one, where we had about 800 people there, and as part of it we did a poetry performance, and I read a poem called I Want Hope Not Hate, and within the poem it was about how, specifically it was about Muslims and seeing the newspaper headlines around terrorist attacks and how the Muslim community is all getting branded with that. And when I finished, it was quite a powerful poem, and I think I must have been having a bad day because I read it quite angrily. But it worked. But afterwards, a lot of people came up to me and said, "Yes, that's what we feel." And this is the thing about it. There's so much that people want to express, and sometimes poetry can be the means to actually let that out and to actually get that into or be heard. And that's really, when we knuckle down to it, that's what protesting, that's what pushing for change is all about. It's about being heard and then continuing to be heard until that change happens.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's even just poetry. Anything can be political, but you also need to understand, don't use one thing as a means. Don't just say, oh yeah, well, I'm writing poetry, it's political, that's my bit done. It's not. You need to be able to branch out and use different means, because sometimes words is not enough.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately words will change whatever we're trying to do, but as you said, sometimes there's revolution. As I said, I'm going back to Huddersfield back in the 18th century sometime, where Huddersfield was apparently an army soldier camp because of the Luddite movement. You know, people they didn't want change, so the Luddites, if you're familiar with the Luddites, they started breaking all the robots or the equipment. So it's just the world we live in, and there will always be people who protest peacefully and write to these prominent people. And there are people who are going to stand out and demand a change, you know. So as I said, I'm more for presenting an argument on paper and with a list of protest signatures all day long, because I have seen where that does work. If you've got enough names, you know, if you get enough names, I think it's like maybe 100,000, 10,000 in some cases, you can change things. And I think the people are the government, and they just forgot, because every legislation we have in this country, we could petition against it if we don't like it, and they have to change it. And because of what's happening now, because of all these people not being paid wages, I've noticed all the petitions that are going around to Parliament, and I've noticed that they're making changes for these people and supporting what these petitions are asking. Parliament should just be sat there waiting for petitions to come in to find out what their job is today. That's where the people have the power, right, to change this, not Parliament. They're just a group of people waiting for the complaints or the sensible arguments that come from the general public about issues that dictate or govern our lives. So I'm all for petitions.
And poetry.
Yeah, you can.
I think because once the artists get on board with certain things, once the artists get really vocal, whether it's poetry or visual arts, music, that can be an agent for change too.
It can get it out there in the public, in the public eye, which means people can get involved in other ways.
It's about that media support. I mean, going back to 1983 during the famine in Ethiopia, and all the support that Bob Geldof got and the media input, you know, that went into that. If all that kind of effort that went into the famine in Ethiopia went into changing the lives for people like George Floyd or the things in America, then we know that, hey, there's something happening. It looks like there looks like a lot more happening than what we see now. Everyone's focusing on the election. They forgot about Mr. George Floyd, God rest him.
We soon move on with the next news, don't we, if we're not careful?
Yeah.
If we don't keep conversation going. And
people are the government. They just forgot. And the government actually know this. And I just realized the more people complain and send those petitions in, you can get every legislation, most things you can get changed. Most things you can get changed by law because the people want it. People are the government.
I think when it reaches a certain amount of signatures, is it 6,000 or 10,000? It has to be considered in Parliament.
Yeah, there's levels.
Right, I'm just conscious of the time, so we're around an hour. And like I say, we could just go on and on with this, and there's so many opinions, and it's fantastic. And I want to thank everybody for taking part this week. It's been amazing. I didn't know if Mohammed and or Donavan would like to finish with a poem.
Mohammed, have you got something you'd like to close with?
Do you want to close with a poem? I'll let you close with a poem today.
I think you can close. If you haven't got anything there, Mo, I can. You know, if you haven't got anything there, I'm just saying.
Let me just have a quick rummage to see if I can find. I know we can edit this, so.
Do you want something heavy or do you want something light? That's what you.
Shall I do one and then you do one, mate?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do that
One
one.
that I've been working on, so apologies for the roughness. But it's called Ordinary, and it's written about how, to an extent, it kind of like refers back to that youth question. It's about how the majority of people of us are just not noticed.
Yeah.
So it's called Ordinary. We are the ordinary. We move in the visuals of unseen and the audio of unheard because we are the ordinary. We skate around the peripherals of a spotlight, the backdrop on a stage, unnoticed but as a glimpse, unrecognized later, for we are the ordinary. We passed you in the travels of your day, in many places, in many looks. You saw us, we were there, but you didn't notice us, for we are the ordinary. We waited on the platform, the bus stop, in traffic and queues and workplaces, there beside you as normal, though passing by as forgetful, for we are the ordinary. We pushed carts in a supermarket, passing frequently without incident, served you at the checkout, just blurs in your trip, for we are the ordinary. Our lives develop each memory, kept precious in a thought, but not special to you, seen as mundane to most, for we are the ordinary. We are painted in the eyes of the masses as heroes and victims and perpetrators. You see us, not me, in the photo of a crowd, for we are the ordinary. We shouted to be heard from the noise, above the amplified hate. If you'd listened, you'd have heard. But we are the ordinary, the unseen, the unheard, the unnoticed. When will we see? Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. That's fantastic.
I like that, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, excellent. Because it is about just being normal, and we are ordinary people. This particular poem, it's it's called "These Working Hands," recently written, and it starts with, "These working hands are mapped with contours and lines that reflect the grit and grime, the coal from the mines and grease from the twines of iron, from Newcastle upon Tyne to Mount Zion. These working hands are a breed and brand of their own that have sown seeds, stitched claddings, pulled on ships' riggings, navigating, rag and bone collecting on road diggings, cut stone through wind, sleet, and the winter snow. These working hands have tied granny knots, built broad castles of granite rocks, sailed the seas from western ports and eastern docks. Crocs have been tackled with these working hands, strong in battle, still gentle to the face, and even with a baby's rattle. These working hands are cotton thorn, torn, cut and blistered, weather cut and tough, still soft and tender with their touch. Working hands a serial giver, and always there to deliver. In the family tree they have always invested. A great grandma's hands were never rested. I will never forget these great working hands. They're part of the family of working great grands. Thank you very much.
Great poems.
Fantastic.
And on
So-
that amazing note,
Sorry?
on that amazing note, I think we might have to pull things to a close. Looking at Olivia to see what you think.
Yes, thanks everybody. It's been another really, really interesting session. I think we've given people loads to think about. So thanks again.
Thank you for coming. I hope you've had some interesting thoughts from our questions or our answers. And as I say, we're passing the baton on to you, that everybody's responsible for making it better for everybody else. And as I said before, if you're not part of the solution, you may as well be part of the problem.
Thank you again. It's been always a delight to be in this company. I know we always have so much to talk about. We've got to remember this is about this is a carry on from Black History Month, and I think it's quite apt to listen to something from Black History Month in November, because the message we were trying to get across is Black History Month is not something that is about October. It's about a springboard in October that carries it through, and that's the thing to do. Learn about the local history as well. There's amazing stories on our doorstep, which happened yesterday and is today's history. Learn about them, because we'll find out what influences we've had and what the local history has carved for our lives.
Absolutely. And there's some great things you can watch again from all the events that we did on Black History Month. Just go to Kirklees Together, Black History Month 2020, and you'll find the booklet there, and you can check out all the events that most of them have been recorded, including a virtual tour around Huddersfield that tells you all sorts of incredible history. So go have a look.
Amberine?
Well, I just want to say, it's just a quote I'm going to leave you with. Those who stand for nothing will fall for those who don't stand for anything will fall for nothing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very good.
That's right.
Good. So much wisdom. Okay.
So